Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. My guest today is David Fields of ReadyAI. Hello, David.
Hey, Mark. Really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. And as we were discussing before the show, I'm definitely an admirer of the painting behind you, and that is real. That's actually a physical thing behind you. This is not like a blue screen thing, right?
It is real. Less and
Yeah,
less
very
real
nice.
paintings these days, but it is a real one.
Yeah, no, it's great. So let's get into what you're talking at ReadyAI. But before we do that, let's just sort of set the table a little bit with the concept of Bittensor for those who haven't been paying attention. Bittensor is sort of this Bitcoin-like AI environment. It's sort of part coin, part AI project. And the idea is that you are rewarded in Tao tokens for creating great AI. So instead of proof of work, where you're crunching for the hash of the previous block, you are using that GPU to crunch AI data and produce great AI. And there's this whole system of how they detect that and how they reward that. And they're basically roughly 50 or so subnets, each focused on a different AI problem in the system. And you are subnet 33 out of those 50. Did I get that right?
That's right. That's right. And yeah, I mean, I like to think of Bittensor as really sort of trying to solve this, I think the holy grail sort of in blockchain, which is proof of useful work, right? The proof of work mechanism, which was really what kind of attracted me to crypto about a decade ago. I studied economics at Harvard and kind of focused on incentive design. And so it was, really exciting to me when I kind of came upon Bittensor in 2013 and started investing then. Also got very excited about Ethereum. And I sort of think that Bittensor is probably the next kind of most innovative chain to those two, because it's actually trying to solve a fundamentally different problem, which is around proof of useful work. So enabling people to not just do a useless but computationally expensive task, which is what proof of work is doing. It's essential to the security of the network. But is there an ability to create useful work out of that securing mechanism? And that's sort of fundamentally what I think Bittensor is trying to achieve with a focus on AI machine learning work.
Yeah. So you had mentioned, and I did see this in your bio, that you are ex-Disney and you're a Harvard guy. So tell us just a little bit about your background and what you've done leading up to this moment.
Yeah, so I studied economics at Harvard and came out to work at Disney in a group called Strategic Planning, which did all of the M&A and strategy work across the company. It was at a time where I was pretty lucky as an analyst, got to work on the Pixar deal when we acquired Pixar.
Oh, wow.
And got to know the senior team very well as a result. So ended up leaving there to go work for the former CEO, Michael Eisner. I ran investments for his company called Tornante for about 7.5 years, investing at the intersection of entertainment and tech. And that was really kind of in the Web 2 wave as the emergence of kind of two big trends, Web 3 and AI, really started picking up. And I thought we're going to really intersect in a very significant way. I got very excited and partnered up with three great co-founders to found Afterparty, which is sort of the precursor to ReadyAI, and then kind of get into kind of how those two work together. Dan, who's our co-founder and CTO, we actually met working on kind of an early DePIN project in crypto. He has an AI machine learning background where he was doing building AI systems for Intuit and Demand Media before that. Eitan Albaz, who founded Applied Semantic, which became Google AdSense, and also founded Scopely, which is a big mobile gaming company here in Los Angeles. And Robert Graham, who kind of comes out of the creator entertainment world, founded one of the first influencer marketing agencies. So really kind of brought that team together to found Afterparty. With Afterparty, we've been building a platform for people to own, control, and monetize like their digital twins, where ensuring kind of authenticity, accuracy, kind of control over that information is pretty paramount. And that's really kind of what brought us to the problem that we're solving with ReadyAI. So the core to all of that authenticity and accuracy is really around structured data. It's bringing the data into these AI systems in a way that allows those systems to access that information most accurately and most authentically. And that's pretty computationally expensive. And I think we probably get into some thoughts I have on like kind of why a group should approach Bittensor, like what kind of makes a good subnet problem, or sort of how I think about it. But you want something that's sort of computationally expensive, which this was.
Yeah.
For us, a problem that obviously there's many people sort of, looking to structure data for AI systems. We'll probably get into talking about how, we look to compete with ScaleAI over time as sort of a decentralized ScaleAI. But ScaleAI just reported that they're doing $1 billion in ARR now. They 4x that just in the last 12 months. So a rapidly sort of growing area and need for structured data. And the other sort of, really interesting.
Sorry, I don't want to drill. I don't want to leave Scale AI for a second. Let's drill down into that for a second, so that I can provide some context for what you're doing at Ready. So, and I've been following Scale AI a little bit over the last couple of years, but not in detail. I'll tell you what my understanding is. Lucy Guo, who is one of the founders, we follow each other on Twitter, so that's basically where I've learned most of what I know about Scale AI. And my understanding is that basically you have these AI systems, these LLMs, that are ingesting data of various sorts, but it's largely untagged. There's no context for that data. It's just trying to figure out on the fly like what it is. And if you can annotate that data, if a human can go and annotate that data and provide sentience, we can provide context that machines cannot yet. So having humans go in there and annotate that data, sort of do one layer of digestion before the LLMs ingest that data, greatly enhances the LLM's ability to make sense of that data and therefore produce greatly enhanced intelligence. So far, so good?
Absolutely.
Now, Scale AI went and did this by hiring, inexpensive labor overseas in mass quantities, right? So they've got I don't know what countries they're in, but think something like, giant human farms in India, all basically spending their day tagging data, and scaling that is difficult. So, but it's there's a huge demand for it. People will pay gobs of cash for that. So they're doing incredibly well. So go ahead. You had a thought?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's really well said. And I think the key thing that you said was humans are better at doing it, or LLMs aren't better than doing it yet. Which actually there's sort of been a tipping point, and that's kind of what we realized really with kind of the shift to GPT-4. You started seeing research showing that LLMs could perform these annotation tasks at levels about as accurate as humans. There are benchmarks where people kind of compare those results to Mechanical Turk, which is sort of the generic, Amazon product. Scale AI definitely does additional things on top of like just providing humans. They're delivering kind of completed data sets. They're kind of providing consulting services on top of, just kind of raw, kind of structured data output, because a lot of the stuff that comes out of human annotation is junk data, right? People on Mechanical Turk are doing a poor job. There's actually a lot of research showing that some of them are just like plugging it into an LLM anyway. But while it's cheaper labor because it's overseas, it's actually an extremely costly part of the AI stack and sort of like the spending stack. And so with LLMs, so using kind of what we've built with ReadyAI, which I'd love to get into, we've sort of replaced humans with LLMs. So in the Bittensor ecosystem, just to take it one step more elevated, right? You have miners who perform the work. So miners are the ones competing in our case to provide the best structured annotated data around conversational transcript data that we're processing through the subnet. Validators are the ones who are verifying the accuracy, scaling, or scoring those miners on the quality of the work that they're doing. And so with LLMs,
let me. Sorry, I want to clarify that a little bit, because I wasn't going to get into this, but since you went there, I just want to make absolutely sure everyone follows. So in the Bittensor universe, it operates via three parties largely. So there's the subnet owner and operator, and you can think of them as the people who define the AI problem and set up the Hunger Games, right? So here's what you're shooting towards. The miners are the competitors in the Hunger Games. So they're the ones that are basically trying to solve the problem in the most creative, most powerful way possible. And the judges of the Hunger Games are the validators. And they're the ones that say, fortune has favored you, minor 8. You get all the rewards this block, right? So that's basically how it works.
Hash Rate is sponsored by Ledger. With the announcement of Ledger Flex and Ledger Stacks, Ledger gives you the best security on the planet for your crypto and identity. Ledger Flex and Stacks drive an e-ink screen with the same secure chip that's in your credit card and passport, except instead of protecting the secrets of banks and governments, Ledger protects your secrets and your private keys. Ledger supports Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and more than 200 other tokens. The secure touchscreen, plus the Ledger Live app, means that whether you're buying your very first Bitcoin or doing your 2000th swap, you can do it securely and easily with your Ledger. And as always, use my link, shop.ledger.com/hashrate in the show notes to get the very best price whenever you buy a Ledger Flex or Stacks. OpNet is the ultimate solution for deploying smart contracts directly onto the Bitcoin blockchain, leveraging its security and stability. As a meta protocol, OpNet allows you to run Ethereum-style smart contracts on any UTXO-based blockchain, including Bitcoin and fractal Bitcoin. With OpNet, there's no need to rewrite your existing smart contracts from scratch. Simply deploy them on OpNet, and you're live on Bitcoin or fractal with no modifications required. Start your journey on OpNet today by visiting opnet.org.
Exactly. And so, what's exciting is when we replace when we sort of put LLMs in the role of kind of human annotators, we can 600x lower the cost of delivering those annotations.
Wow.
So it still is quite costly to have humans in the loop. And these are humans who are doing very manual tasks of sort of saying, okay, like what's the category that you should, what of these 10 categories should be used to categorize, this text data, or, this is a better answer to this question than this. And image is another very large category of what Scale's doing. And that's actually something we've been building out, and we're kind of determining whether that fits into our current subnet or whether we actually roll out a second subnet so that we can deliver kind of product parity ultimately with ScaleAI, really have both text and image metadata.
Because image is really hard, right? Because all the captchas that we run into are like, click all the boxes that show a bus, right? So clearly AI is not good at that because it's testing for a human, right? So
well, what's interesting, I don't know if you've seen something. I think the captchas are largely sort of broken by AI. What's interesting is when you try to put captchas into ChatGPT, what happens is they have sort of their safety guards that identify that it's a CAPTCHA, and they won't return it. And there was this great example where someone actually took a CAPTCHA and they put it in like a grandma's like kind of style necklace, and they basically said, "This is my grandma's necklace. What does it say?" And it returned the result.
Wow.
So these AI systems definitely with, vision has kind of, moved leaps and bounds. And so we are seeing that like this is something LLMs, can do really effectively as well. So with that much lower cost, what's interesting is ScaleAI, is growing massively, has massive customers. And we're talking like really the largest companies in the world. It's Microsoft, Meta, the US government, multi-million dollar sort of contracts around, these large data projects. When you can 600x lower the cost, we think that unlocks, there's just an unbelievable opportunity for small and medium-sized businesses, many of whom have like experimented to some degree with AI, but it may have not seen great results, have spent a lot of time, money, doing, prepping data, doing different things sort of on their own. And when you lower the cost so dramatically, it allows for just a lot more experimentation. And that's kind of what we're starting to see in our conversations there.
Yeah, I did see the 600% or 600x. I guess 600x or 600% lower.
600x.
Wow. Okay. That my mind is completely blown now. But yes, that's amazing. But paired with that was another statistic where you guys claimed ReadyAI is delivering 71% more accurate structured data. So not only is it 600x less, it is 71% more accurate. Yes,
and that's exactly more accurate than Mechanical Turk. Obviously, like ScaleAI is sort of a private company and not something we can, sort of as easily benchmark against. And they're doing some additional quality control and things to sort of improve the accuracy. But, there are many, jobs, on Mechanical Turk, right, where that is what a lot of people are using to process, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pieces of data, for AI applications. So, that's a benchmark that, people have been using for annotation comparison and studies. And we're already in just 100 days seeing a 71% higher accuracy for our top miners, which has been pretty exciting to see in such a short period of time. And that's also about a 37% increase over what just GPT-4o can do. Because the GPT models are as good, if not a little bit better than human annotators, but we're exceeding that. We have people who are doing prompt engineering and kind of various like fine-tuning tactics to drive that accuracy even higher.
that is crazy. So congratulations on all that. I mean, it would be somewhat ironic if ScaleAI was disrupted by AI, right? But I mean, with 600, if it's 600x cost savings and 71% more accurate, that feels very disruptive. That feels like it's actually incredibly realistic.
Yeah, and I think that there's just such an insatiable appetite for for structured data. I mean, for a company to 4x to $1 billion ARR is just a monumental feat. So I've been impressed from afar at kind of what they've been able to do. I'm oversimple. All they do is not just sort of put together, kind of human annotations and deliver research. And what's interesting, and I've been talking to a number of people in the industry about this. There's kind of a bifurcation happening. People are recognizing that there's a lot of tasks that can sort of go down the path of LLMs doing that work. Yeah. There is this really unique architecture with Bittensor that allows us to verify that LLM answer in that kind of architecture. So that is an important thing, right? There has to still be someone who's checking that these LLMs are returning good data, whether you're just averaging it. Well, you have to have some sort of tactic to do that. So we have that kind of in that side of the annotation world. And then the other side, and there actually is a group that's going to be coming out. They've sort of publicly been talking about it and have a test net, TensorPlex, which is a great group in the Bittensor ecosystem. They're a validator. They've been building a subnet for RLHF, which is reinforced learning with human feedback. So that's one of the main sort of human in the loop parts of what ScaleAI does. And there's more and more a need for humans in the loop for more complicated tasks. So think like maybe a coding problem or understanding how a mathematical proof, was derived, medical analysis, right? Things that sort of require experts that aren't just the average human is able to answer this better than a machine. That is one side, which we think LLMs will completely sort of take over, over the next, couple of years. And then there's human tasks that still are required for a number of elements within, sort of the machine learning framework as well.
Right. So tell me why, actually, let me go here because we're on the topic of humans versus machines. So my understanding is that if an AI ingests AI produced data and that happens too much, eventually it's sort of like a copy of a copy of a copy. The AI goes mad, if you will, which is sort of what you're doing, right? So doesn't.
It's a good question. I think that I think this is the idea around sort of how synthetic data can be used to train models, I think is a hotly debated topic. I wouldn't say that there are sort of definitive. I think there are people who espouse what you're saying, which is you start putting too much synthetic data, it's ultimately going to corrupt these models. There are groups like sort of the like Noose research group that, are very big into sort of how synthetic data can kind of take us to levels with machine learning development that we can't get just with sort of human feedback. But what we're doing is a little bit different than sort of pure synthetic data, because we're really providing annotations that make the ingestion of sort of human data into an LLM fine-tuning or RAG database more machine readable, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So it's really about taking human data that already exists and making that structured for the purposes of fine-tuning or RAG, where synthetic data is sort of a component of this. We actually are big believers that synthetic data, can really elevate machine learning, kind of applications. I think we're sort of on that side of it. But the annotation piece is a little bit different. It's more for the structuring of the data.
Okay. So let's talk about Bittensor specifically now. So, you look at something like ScaleAI, and my God, they're making money hand over fist. Clearly, this is a great business, and if you can make a viable competitor, why not? Why then would you do this using Bittensor? Why not just not use Bittensor? What's the advantage to doing it on Bittensor?
Yeah, so I think this I think is one of those kind of like, why Bittensor, like why should a project sort of think about, utilizing Bittensor for, some problem that they've identified, or some problem that they might be having that they think is more universal. So for us, it really came down to a few things. One was high computational cost problem, something that would, and that there's kind of massive demand for, well outside of just some of the use cases that we had for it. Two was around the verification system. So enabling LLMs to provide these annotations is one thing. There still has to be this verification that the data is accurate, is high quality. So that combination of kind of minor validator, kind of loop is extremely useful for our use case and sort of what we're trying to sort of accomplish with LLMs performing the work, but ensuring that the quality of that work is quite high. So that's sort of two key things. A third thing that I think is a bit unique for us, but I think is always an important consideration with Bittensor, is with decentralized AI, you have this constant question of double spend. And what I mean by that is you always have to have this verification, right? If I'm inferencing into any decentralized AI system, there's some form of verifying that was done correctly, and that incurs a secondary cost. It could be multiple X more costly than just one inference. So closed systems like OpenAI will likely beat on a cost basis decentralized AI. So you need another reason why, for decentralized AI that isn't just cost. And because we're removing a core human or a core cost that's the human cost of annotation, we're able to actually deliver on a cost basis, which is kind of super exciting for us, that we can go and open this up to partners that couldn't afford a scale AI type of an offering.
And so you guys chasing down? You're actively chasing down customers and making revenue with this, right?
So we launched about 100 days ago. Now about 4 months ago, and a lot of what we've been doing, I think, in the early part of launching a subnet, it's really important to be monitoring this. You kind of mentioned it like it's the Hunger Games, right? That part of a decentralized approach is you design an incentive mechanism, which we spend a lot of time thinking through. We've kind of designed one that's, I think, fairly novel, and in the ecosystem. We could talk a little bit about the specifics if you'd like. But as you mentioned, like miners are incentivized to get to the top of your scoring algorithm. They're not incentivized directly to just do the best work, right? You have to align those two things. You have to make sure that your scoring reflects the best work and the output that you're looking for. So we've definitely done a bit of continued iteration on that. We've also initially started out with, like I would recommend most Bittensor subnets to do, with a like sort of a test-based querying. So we were querying all from like a very large podcast transcription data set. So we were providing structured data. We actually have now created like the largest metadata tagged conversational data set that exists. So, very helpful for like more natural language AI models and fine tuning. But we then launched the ability for validators to do organic queries. And so organic queries means that validators can feed in their own data from a customer, whatever data they would like to get structured. And so that's sort of an important, call it like kind of the second phase that we've entered into here. So that organic querying capability already exists today for validators. We're going to be building more of a front end for customers to process that data that they have stored in the cloud and enable validators to just open up their bandwidth kind of via that front end. So I know you talked with Mog. Mog's one of the large validators who's building his own front ends, right? He's proactively looking to monetize the bandwidth that he has via the network. There are lots of other large validators where their perspective is we sort of think subnet owners should be the ones that create that demand, and then we share in sort of the value that's created there. We have the bandwidth, you have the customers, and we can share in that together. Bittensor launched something called child hotkeys. That's probably a little in the weeds, but that enables like subnet owners who aren't validators to actually create that kind of like shared bandwidth, like with validators that aren't looking to build their own front ends. So we're going to be doing that, and we have sort of a few things there that we're layering in, but we are starting to have pretty interesting conversations with enterprises, and just with the demand for kind of structured data now, it's been pretty exciting to see, just like in very early exploration.
Now, isn't one of the rules of Bittensor Tao that whatever AI you produce has to be freely available? So it's sort of like, so in other words, you can't charge companies for access to this, or can you?
Well, so I think we're going to see a bit more of a move towards monetization of the digital commodity itself, especially as like dynamic Tao rolls out. And this is kind of, from my perspective, I think there's a lot of really interesting things that are more research oriented. All of the software, all the validator code, all of the miner code that we put out is fully open source. The miners, though, right, they're doing custom things on their end. We don't even have an insight into necessarily how they're like fine tuning, engineering to get better results out of our subnet. So these miners, that is proprietary, how they're delivering that more valuable sort of structured data. And as DTAO rolls out, I think what you're going to see is that the tokens associated with the different subnets are going to be more valuable if people value that digital commodity. They want access to structured data. They want to be able to process more structured data through these miners and sort of effectively through the validators, to the miners for their intelligence. I think that's going to be a really important component of, is your digital commodity valuable? If the digital commodity is fully open, like the model itself is available on Hugging Face, and so I can get the best model that the subnet has produced, and it's fully open source. I think there's going to be a tension between that and sort of the dynamic like alpha token of that subnet. I think they're going to have to figure out ways to create some monetization of that digital commodity. And I think it'll be a little bit more straightforward for ones that, are providing more of a service where, yes, the software is open source, to start, but there are components of this that are proprietary that allow miners, validators, and subnet owners to monetize.
Okay. Well, so let's just talk about the Bittensor universe in general. So you started working with them anyway about 100 days ago. How did you get into Bittensor? What was sort of your thought process there? And what do you think about the rest of the ecosystem? What sort of interests you?
Yeah, so I became aware of Bittensor probably a year and a half ago or so. Some of our investors, had invested in Bittensor, given that we were doing stuff at the intersection of crypto AI, sort of pointed us in that direction. And I thought it was interesting, but we were pretty, kind of heads down building. And this was pre-Subnets launching. And I think it was just sort of a little after Subnets, maybe it was a month or two after Subnets launched. And it kind of, resurfaced. I was talking to one of our investors about it. And it fully clicked for me with the launch of Subnets. I was able to now see that this was kind of a platform that people could build really any arbitrary sort of thing focused on AI, and potentially, kind of build a, really important thing within sort of the AI stack. So I got very excited about it. We started spending time thinking about how we might be able to build something on Bittensor starting early in the year. And we spent a bit of time really digging in. I think we wanted to build something that we felt, was, had applicability to kind of the needs that we had at the time, but also kind of a long-term, kind of strategy around how we could build this and fit into the mechanisms of Bittensor. And I think that took us a few months to really kind of wrap our heads around, well, like what would be the right approach here. But, as I said, at the beginning of the call, I think Bittensor really has the potential to do effectively the holy grail of like what, we've wanted to see in blockchain for a decade plus. It's proof of useful work around the most important work that, we've seen in tech, in my lifetime in AI. So I think the opportunity is really significant. Subnets are still less than a year old in concept. So I think we're still very early in this network. We're now up to about 50 subnets. I think there's a lot of teams doing, really exciting work. I think we're, still in like that experimental phase where I think people can also have different opinions on, this is sort of what I think is going to be most valuable to the ecosystem, to the network, for the long term. We're definitely believers in kind of that digital commodity, making that as, sought after sort of as possible is kind of what we're focused on as, DTAO emerges here in probably the next, number of months.
Can you actually, let's take a little sidebar on DTAO. Can you explain what that is for people who don't know?
Yeah, and I'll do my best. I mean, I think DTAO is still a work in progress. Like they put out a proposal around it about, 8 or 9 months ago. They've been iterating around it for a number of months. There have been 2 tests that have been run kind of on testnet, looking at implementation. So we're still figuring out like what this
typically it is, like, but there's sort of like an overarching concept.
Exactly. Yeah. But at a high level, what currently exists in Bittensor, you have the kind of miners, validators, and subnet owners. Well, the validators are the ones verifying that the work is being done, kind of as it should be on the subnet. But they are also determining which of the subnets get emissions from the network. So they're saying they're kind of the judge as well on the value of what's being contributed in Bittensor. They are large holders of Tao themselves, but they also have people delegating Tao to them, staking it with them. And these large holders, it's the top 64, set weights and basically say, okay, this group I think gets a few percent of the network. This one is so great it deserves 5%, 1%, and that's still overly centralized. And it has, I think, maybe even more importantly than kind of overly centralized, it doesn't have any incentive around doing that correctly other than reputation. And there's no, if you way overvalue something or undervalue it, there's really no impact. And this, I think, has sort of all along been something that Bittensor has recognized. We're sort of, 1 year into subnets even existing. So like this is part of progressively sort of decentralizing. DTAO, when that rolls out, will effectively create a token around every single one of the subnets that is dynamically tied to Tao. And effectively, it will, instead of just validators saying, I think this is the subnet that's most valuable, the ones who want to stake and get emissions from any individual subnet will actually have to stake some Tao and receive some of that individual token back. And if other people don't value it as highly and they're unstaking and taking their money away from that subnet token, then you will have potentially lost, capital having invested, or kind of, bought into that subnet token, or vice versa. You identified one early and, believed that, this was going to be one that created a lot of value and others followed in, then like you're actually going to be receiving vastly more in emissions. So it puts an incentive, it puts a market mechanism into determining what's most valuable and which of these digital commodities are most valuable. And I think it's a really exciting kind of next phase. There's a lot of, sort of complexity and nuance in how to implement it. But that's part of why there's a bit of testing going on and trying to figure out the best way, kind of forward.
Yeah. So it's basically, instead of me owning Tao, where I basically, own a piece of the network, if you will, I can trade my Tao in for, partial ownership of a subnet. And if that subnet does well, if I bet wisely, then I will win, and I will get a disproportionate share of Tao emissions because I bet well from that subnetwork, because that subnetwork is deemed to have utility or use, I guess, by the general world. So what determines whether a subnet succeeds? Is it usage? Like, doesn't it need some sort of market reinforcement? Normally in the market, the regular world marketplace, it would be sales, right? As more revenue comes in, more people value me, I'm selling more. But what is that? I guess it's traffic here.
Yeah, I think it'll be sort of a combination of things, right? If you think about, Bittensor still being very early, kind of early stage companies tend to have, I'd say, more mixed metrics around success, right? It's usage, it can be, kind of revenue, it could be, sort of promise of, this market, or, kind of how large is the TAM of the area you're sort of going after. So I think people will be making, different assessments, especially early on around it. But right now, like so the daily emissions are all emitted in Tao, right? There's 7,200 Tao that go out to all of the subnets, are split between subnet owner, validator, and miner. In the DTAO emissions, all the emissions that go out to the miner, validator, and subnet owner are in the DTAO tokens. And Tao actually goes into the liquidity pools that basically enable kind of more liquidity for those subnet tokens to be bought in or out. So, there's some really interesting dynamics where you can continue to hold Tao, but you'll also receive far less in terms of emissions if you're holding just Tao than if you are sort of participating in the network in a deeper way. And I think that, will encourage people to, to participate, which is, obviously a big part of what they're trying to achieve with it.
Yeah, because if you stake Tao right now, which I do, it's something like 16%, maybe 18% emissions. It's pretty good. So, yeah, I watch that thing take up every day. I'm like, oh, I made some more Tao.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
One of the benefits. And that'll go down for anyone that just wants to hold Tao. But if you're participating in the DTAO side of things, then, you could potentially be making, more in terms of, return.
All right. So to sum up dynamic Tau, they, basically the sort of 16 to 18%, yield that I'm getting a year just for staking Tau, that's going to go away. And the network's going to be like, well, that was fun, but that's over now. Now you got to work for your bread. You got to go and bet, use your brain, figure out which one of these subnets is going to be worth something. And only if you do that correctly, and potentially you can make more than 16 to 18%. But the easy money days are over as of the launch of Dynamic Tau. So
that's right.
Okay. So let's talk about what other subnets interest you. What are you looking at going, wow, that's cool. And what is your interaction like with the other subnet owners? I assume, there's like a convocation somewhere where you guys all talk and compare notes, and what is that universe like?
Yeah, so we actually just did an event that we co-hosted at Token 2049 with a few of the other kind of subnet owners that we really like. The TensorPlex guys were there, who as I mentioned, they're validators launching a subnet. Cato, which is a group that does sort of data indexing. They have a really cool product. They were there as well. There's the 3Gen, which is doing like 3D 3D generations, for kind of 3D art. Super cool stuff, and they've been achieving some really high quality generations on their subnet in a pretty short period of time. So I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff. I mean, you have everything kind of across the stack, really, from pre-training subnets to fine-tuning subnets to stuff in the kind of data structuring, data sourcing, all the way through to application layer stuff. I mean, I think there's some interesting use cases. People are experimenting with prediction markets, right? You have a few different prediction markets around sports. You have some prediction markets now around like real estate prices. And I think seeing kind of what, those subnets are able to do and how that intelligence, compares against, kind of the, Web 2 versions, I think will be really interesting to see.
Yeah. So there's a site called taopill.ai. So TAOPILL .ai. That's really good. It actually lists out all the subnets. You can go click on them and, see what everybody's up to. So that by far, that's the best front door to the Bittensor universe. You've probably watched some of the shows where, every damn show, and I got to do it in this show too, just to make sure I do it in every show. I complain about the fact that there's no good front door for Bittensor for consumers. Like they can't really see this thing, right? It's like ChatGPT. I know where to go.
And that is true. And like we've actually been talking to a number of subnet owners about this. I've talked with Sammy, who does, taopill.ai. We actually launched, and this was part of like kind of showcasing the value of the structured data that we have coming out of Subnet 33. So we launched a Subnet 33 AI that is me being sort of the founder of Subnet 33. And you can ask me any question about the subnet. We've structured kind of all of the docs from our GitHub, all of the blog posts, like kind of all of our roadmaps, everything we've put out there. And so if you're a miner, looking to get up to speed, right, most miners are going to Discord, they're asking questions that have been asked, probably, that's no fault of theirs, but 50 times. And, they can put in error messages and things that like we've seen and like we've kind of put into this AI resource. So you can actually go to ReadyAI.ai and you can kind of play around with the Subnet 33 AI bot. And we are talking about rolling that out more for other subnets as well. I think having more of this like natural language way to interface with like subnets is going to be more and more important.
Now, is it when you say it's you, is it like an avatar of you, basically?
It's just sort of meant to be in my voice. Like you'll see a little image of me. But I think putting out sort of these AIs. I think kind of having kind of the personal touch of like the founder, kind of being the front of it made it feel a little kind of come to life a little bit more.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about competition from and the Bittensor's competition. So I've poked around at sort of the edges of other things. I mean, what it looks like to me right now is a Bittensor Tao, like 90% of the value in this universe is going to accrue to it. That's what it looks like right now. There are other competitors. There's one called Com.ai, which is, some disgruntled Bittensor people kind of went off and did their own thing. They kind of pulled a Cardano, right? So, like Charles got mad at Vitalik or whatever. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but he left and did Cardano. And, that had some success on its own. It wasn't Ethereum, but it was not nothing. And it continues to be, a top 20, top 30 coin. And it looks like, Com.ai is trying to get something going, but they're nowhere near the size of what Bittensor is. I think their market cap 20 million or 25 million. Versus Bittensor's, I think it's past $1 billion at this point. I'm not sure exactly where it's at right now. And it had a surge recently. It like doubled in price over the last month or so. So there was
That's
that.
right. Yeah. I mean, I'd say like competitively, if you sort of look, there are a handful of kind of already liquid, kind of tokens that are, doing stuff in and around AI. I think that Bittensor has definitely elevated itself to sort of the top of that group. And, I saw, Sammy was sort of talking about this recently. Many of the other kind of AI projects are really kind of going after more of like a vertical within kind of the AI stack. Bittensor has created this, kind of Yuma consensus, or this way that you can kind of have any kind of AI system or part of the stack kind of built on top of it, because that consensus mechanism can work across any sort of work that's being done there. And that's really unique. There are definitely a few kind of fast followers, that, VCs have started to back. But
yeah, didn't Teal back one recently? I assume.
Yeah, there was one that Teal backed. I forget which that one was. I mean, there's a couple like Sentient and Sahara. And, when you look at these projects, I mean, they seem like they have, strong teams, who are putting them together. But these are still like either pre-testnet or maybe just getting onto testnet. And these systems are very complicated. I think for Bittensor to get to where it was with kind of the subnet launch required them doing one subnet initially and kind of learning how that all worked. There were, some very large hiccups, kind of along the way with like miners, trying to take over the network. And like there, some like seeing kind of these, early crypto systems. I mean, seeing kind of the early Ethereum system, right? CryptoKitties launched, and that took up like 25% of the traffic on the network, right? So there's a lot of complexity. There's a lot of just needing to sort of see it in the wild that Bittensor is just way ahead on. And I think that's going to continue to be a big benefit to them, versus a lot of stuff that's out there. But I mean, decentralized AI, I think is going to be a massive sort of category. I think there are multiple aspects of why it's important. And I kind of think that crypto and AI feel like they're two sides of the same coin. Ultimately, you really have to have,
I think so too.
Some of this, if you want AIs to be transacting on their own, you need some digitally native way for that to be, executed. And so I think there's just a lot of use cases where they combine in a really exciting way.
Yeah, I mean, Chamath Palihapitiya, I'm sure I pronounced that correctly.
Palihapitiya, I think.
Palihapitiya, thank you. Yes, I think that is correct. That will stay in my head at some point, but not today, apparently. He was on the All In pod, and he mentioned, I was very surprised, but he mentioned Bittensor Tao on a recent episode. It was like maybe 2 months ago, as something that he felt that his listeners should be listening to. And he mentioned it in the context of, there's a lot of AI companies, they're burning a lot of cash. We're not really getting the returns on most of them that we I guess we kind of thought we would. And his impression was that Bittensor and Tao